Hello, Captains. It's me, Kato Genesis, with a tips and tricks video for Starfield. And even though I still feel like I only scratched the surface with about 60 hours in the game, there are some things I wish were shown a little bit better or shown at all, and some considerations for newcomers that I just found to be missing. And if you're worried about it, you won't find plot spoilers here, unless you consider being introduced to Constellation members as spoilers. But major plot points? Don't worry about it. This is more focused on features and gameplay mechanics. If you have your own tips and tricks about Starfield, please leave them in the comments below. No more waiting. Here are this many tips and tricks I wish I knew when I first started playing Starfield. Something I hopefully just glossed over in my first playthrough is that the mining laser, aka the cutter, has an overcharge firing mode if you hold the aim button when firing that is way more powerful at the cost of losing battery charge faster. It's a recharging weapon though, so there's no real downside that I see. Before you put the cutter in your main favorites hotkey rotation, know that it will auto-equip when you switch to scanner mode too. Scanner mode unlocks a little ways into the tutorial. I do still like to add it to the bottom of my favorites, just so it has a marker that I can see so I don't sell it by accident. If you're hotkeying your items by selecting an item and pressing the button that says favorite, I found that favorited consumables do stay in that spot even if they're depleted. For example, if you've used the last of your Heart Plus and pick up a new one, it'll show back up in that favorite slot. So no need to rebind as far as I can tell. Menuing is one of the weaker points in Starfield, so anything to save time going through multiple windows is something worth knowing, I think. This function has existed in several other open world games at this point, but if you press the data menu button, it'll bring up your main character menu. If you hold it, however, you'll bring up the star map immediately instead. You can peek around corners and pop up from barricades during gunplay. This has been around since Fallout 4, and it's as simple as holding the aim button when you're next to or behind cover. While this is a good feature, we also have the boost pack now, provided you grab the first skill rank for it, which can help you reposition and flank quickly in a firefight. Of course, we finally have mantling too, so if you don't quite make a jump, you can lift yourself up, no problem. Another thing that is possible since Fallout 4 is the ability to hold your interact button while looking at an item to pick up and manipulate it, bodies included. Your attack and aim buttons can rotate it around, and if you want to toss the item you're holding, you can hold your reload button and release to throw it. Careful where you do this though, because if you pick up someone's belongings this way, they'll probably take offense. Once you've gotten through the fairly slow introductions, the companions you gain from Constellation are not just useful in a practical sense, but are a great way to introduce you to the lore of Starfield. Other functions include carrying your stuff, giving you items they find, contributing to persuasive dialogue, crewing your ship, having your back in a fight, and also having surprisingly in-depth personal missions. While I found that I couldn't get them to wear decent spacesuits I found, we can still equip them with decent weaponry. Don't worry about the ammo part much either, as you only need to give them a handful for them to use it endlessly. As mentioned, companions and hirelings can also crew your ship, and you can designate crew at any time by going to the ship menu and pressing the button below that says crew. You can send people to outposts this way too. My question when I first landed on a planet was, what is procedural here? How does the planet generation work? From what I can tell, the resources of a planet are set. You get aluminum there in playthrough 1, you're going to find it there in playthrough 10 as well. Points of interest though, these are what can be the major change, since they generate as you discover them from exploring or objectives. Put simply, the dungeons you discover are handcrafted, but can repeat. If you've played the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, just imagine Oblivion gates, but placed outside and way more interesting and diverse. There are tons of variants of points of interest in the game, and you might not even notice repeats due to different aspects changing each time. The only reason I really noticed in the first place is because books and magazines are in some static locations, and there can be duplicates. As you probably expect though, loot in containers and end chests is still randomized. So with this system, I imagine the procedural points of interest could get repetitive, but I estimate it'll take a few hundred hours to get to that point. There's a lot more that gets factored into the procedural generation stuff that I probably don't even know yet, but adding that on top of random encounters too, ships coming down to attack or ask for assistance, friendly NPCs needing assistance or selling goods, experiments with bad outcomes, or maybe good sometimes, all kinds of things to discover while you're out and about. So this is the first Bethesda game in ages where a traditional local map, even in major cities, doesn't exist. I have a personal grievance with this, of course, because giving directions is something I do a lot to lead you to that sweet loot. At least we have a compass though. We're not totally mapless though, and the best we get locally is the surface map, which can be accessed from the star map or your scanner, and it simply shows the points of interest in that zone that you have discovered or seen in the distance. You can set markers from the screen and also fast travel with it, and also if you just want to fast travel somewhere that you can see, you can point your scanner to a discovered location and select it without needing to open your surface map. What is worth picking up? Previous Bethesda games taught me that everything can be scrapped down or recycled, but that is not the case with Starfield. If we're after valuables, rare, epic, and legendary equipment are a given, but what else? If you are after credits, do keep an eye out for Earth antiques, like flip lighters and old figurines. Some classic books like Moby Dick, Count of Monte Cristo, and Dracula also fetch a few hundred credits. As for practical and useful loot, be on the lookout for anything marked as a manufactured component or resource when its tooltip pops up. As for examples of what not to bother with, Starfield does have resource gathering and manufacturing, but does lack the scrap everything mechanic from previous titles. That doesn't make the system bad per se, since the first moments of the game teach us ore mining, but sadly this means desk fans are no longer a source of screws, they're just desk fans. For a game about exploration and gathering samples and looting a lot of stuff, the limit on inventory space is stronger than ever, and you'll probably want various ways to mitigate that. Firstly, the heaviest items you'll carry around are weapons, armor, bulk food items, and especially manufactured components. Ship parts to repair your ship will get special mention here because they weigh 10 kilograms each, so those should be stored in your cargo bay no matter what. Keep in mind that there are also ways to modify your own carry capacity, like the weightlifting skill and pocket mods for your spacesuit. When it comes to your ship specifically, you can add more cargo bays, of course, at the cost of mass, but you can also invest into the payloads tech skill to increase how much your existing cargo hold can contain. Obviously, there's a myriad of companions and crew members you can bring along with you, all of which are sworn to carry your burdens. The adoring fan you can gain with the hero worshipped trait is even built for weightlifting and is happy, no, proud to carry your things. Outposts do have a container called solid storage that you'll certainly have a use for, even if it's nothing complex. Having a spot to drop off resources from your ship is fantastic. When you are right next to your ship as well as inside, you can access the cargo bay from your menus via the ship menu and store items if need be. However, I found it easier to use the little access terminal in the cockpit that I missed for numerous hours of playtime because, well, it kind of blends in with all the other terminals and panels around, and it does move depending on the cockpit that you have too. But it will be in the cockpit. It seems sometimes like the cargo bay is accessible when you're in big cities like New Atlantis and Aquila City, maybe friendly areas. I didn't find much consistency in this, so I just kind of tried it wherever I was when I needed to offload some things. When you're in the cargo menu and wish to just store your resources quickly, switch to your own inventory and go to the resources tab. It seems only here will a store all resources button appear. I don't know why such a necessary button is so buried, but that's where I could find it. Contraband items like organs and mech parts that are marked with this yellow icon will fetch tons of cred sticks, but of course, you need to find the right buyer and not get caught with them during ship scans. Conveniently, the right buyer can be any trade authority shop or kiosk, and certain faction vendors with less scruples than the United Colonies. If you can't get to your buyer and want to keep the heat off while you search, you can do what I did and just stockpile all your contraband goods at one of your remote outposts until you do. As I'd already mentioned, the Trade Authority is your one-stop shop if you have illicit goods or stolen items, provided you get them past security checks. They'll have these green kiosks in each of the big cities when you step off your ship, and occasionally storefronts in the more corrupt marketplaces of the game. While it may not be intended, and I'm going to call this a feature, you can also use buyers like this to launder your stolen items at no additional cost with the buy back button. Simply sell all of your items that have that annoying red marker, switch to buy back, and take them all back with no additional cost. Containers, terminals, and doors all can have varying levels of locks, so like most RPGs with sweet loot, ensuring you have digipicks and invested a couple of points into security can only be a benefit. At base level, when you're using a digipick on something, seeing about using the most pins first can help guarantee a successful lockpick. If you start by using some of the options with 1 or 2 pins, you might end up with too many extras when you hit the inside circle. The reason I brought up leveling security a couple of times instead of just one is that the second rank of security makes opening locks easier by coloring the rings blue when your selection can fit. Combat is a given and one way to rack up experience. However, if you've got an interest in scanning everything you see, finding landscape features and surveying worlds will yield not only fascinating formations in life, but also a sizable chunk of experience. Did you know that Constellation has its own mission board in the Lodge's basement workshop? I'm not sure why this is where it's placed, but you can get plenty of exploratory missions from this if you'd like to focus on surveying. That's not all. If you fully survey a world, there's a bunch of credits Constellation's own Vladimir is willing to pay for the data too, so double the credits if you're grabbing from that mission board. You'll get introduced to Vladimir partway through the main quest Into the Unknown. I found menuing for landing site purposes to break up the immersion a bit too much for my liking, but I did find something to help keep it intact a little bit more. When you're looking at a planet or moon from your ship, you can activate your scanner and point your ship to an established landing site if there are any, then just commence landing. While it can be rewarding, in the case of Outposts, there were actually a few things I was just confused about when I started messing around with them. The first thing I had to look up an answer to was simply how to delete an outpost. To do this, you can just walk up to the beacon, hold the rename button, and it'll ask you if you want to delete your outpost. Also, a little bonus, if you're going to be spending time building an outpost with the overhead camera, make sure your character is in a safe spot to do so, especially if there are hostile wildlife in the area. For the longest time, I could not figure out an efficient way to get resources off of my ship and into my outpost, but now I think I've got a handle on the simple version at least. Provided you have your ship landed nearby on a landing pad or on the ground, all you need to do is start constructing solid storage containers. After you've constructed them, simply access them and switch to your ship's cargo, then select Take All Resources to pull them from the ship to the container. It should fill the solid container up and free up that cargo space fairly quickly. There's likely a way to automate this too, but I'll save that for an outpost guide. Like many others, I was super intrigued by the shipbuilding and am happy to say that it's fantastic once you get the hang of its various modes and controls. At basically any large starport, you can speak to the head engineer to repair, build, or even buy and sell ships. The big and complex one where all the fun happens is the build menu option though, of course. When you're here, before you select build, you also have the upgrade button, which I wasn't sure of the difference and facepalmed pretty hard when I got it. If you can't be bothered to build your ship by adding parts or starting from scratch, the upgrade option lets you, well, upgrade the existing things on your ship, like the weapons, shields, reactors, and engines, without any need to piece it together yourself. This will definitely save you time if you've gotten a new ship and just want to make sure it's up to par. Now, if building is your thing, moving parts around is fairly intuitive, but again, getting used to the systems, it took me a while to notice the big indicator on the right showed the height adjustment, which helps a lot with multi-layered ships. For the nitty-gritty on shipbuilding, I think that might call for a separate guide, just like Outposts, so be on the lookout. Now, space is open to you. What kind of tips and tricks have you learned throughout your playtime in Starfield? And how have you been enjoying it? Leave your comments below. If you found these tips and tricks useful, entertaining, or both, please do whatever it is you see fit to show that. Among the things you can do is supporting me on Patreon, like my amazing supporters on screen now, including Wasteland Legends, Sven, and Rose. Thank you so very much for watching. I'm Kato Genesis, and I hope to see you among the stars.